everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sarah Bumgardner, a Member Benefits Coordinator at AFMA, the American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association. And we have a great subject here today I'm very excited about. It's going to be saving for the unexpected. And we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. But before I do, who do we have out there in the audience? I always love to know where everybody is. If you're near a military installation or what branch of service you're with, drop that in the comments box. I am in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm about a 45-minute drive from Fort Campbell. I was a military spouse, a Marine Corps military spouse for 11 years, so I'll be representing some of the Marine Corps here. But please drop in there any comments that you have, where you are, things like that. As we get going and we start talking about this subject, saving for the unexpected, and introduce our wonderful guest here in a moment. But if you have questions, please put those in the comment box. We would love to get to those. I'll be monitoring those, seeing how we can answer those and best get that. So as we get started here, and I guess without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, Shannon Razsadin. So,
hi, thanks so much.
Hi, Shannon. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am so excited to have Shannon here today. She is the Executive Director at Military Family Advisory Network. And Shannon, I could sit and read your bio, but could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do for the Military Family Advisory Network?
Of course. Well, thanks so much for having me, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be with you. So I'm Shannon Razsadin, the President and Executive Director of MFAN, much easier than the mouthful, Military Family Advisory Network. But I have had the privilege of leading this organization really since its inception 9 years ago. And what we do is we work with military families and conduct research to really understand what families are experiencing, what are the pain points, and where are the gaps that need to be filled. And then we work with our partners to make sure those are filled while putting big spotlights on the issues so that the government and others can really step in to make sure those issues are resolved in a timely manner. A little bit about myself. I'm up in Newport, Rhode Island. I am an active duty Navy spouse, so very much in it as it relates to my husband's work. And we have a 4- and 5-year-old who keep me on my toes. I was telling Sarah right before this, my 5-year-old has lots of sass. Her name is Sophia, and then George is a sweet kid. And I'm really passionate about this work because it impacts, all families I care about, including my own. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit more insight into what you do for MFAN and for you as a military spouse, which is so important. So the first discussion area we're going to talk about today is why save for the unexpected. Okay, so what kinds of unexpected events could you tell us, Shannon, that families might find themselves in and unprepared for, military or maybe even non-military?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the work that we do, we see people are kind of living on this bubble of being okay, getting by, and then something happens and it puts them over the edge and they have a hard time coming back from that. So things like frequent moves, things like when you're moving, paying that first and last month rent at a new home or having a down payment, things like the unexpected cost of a move. It could be anything from the physical move itself, or once you get to a new place, oh my gosh, I went from Alaska to Florida, I'm gonna need a new wardrobe. But things like that, or a car repair. I mean, that's could be military or otherwise. These things really can pop up and catch us by surprise. And that's why the emergency savings is so important, so that you don't find yourself in a position of not being able to make ends meet if an emergency or something unexpected does come up.
Yeah, and you really hit kind of on that, being prepared for the unexpected in the sense of we need a plan and we need an emergency fund. That word emergency can come up at any time. What about some maybe specific events that military families might experience, or even the fact that they might be relying on one income a lot of times?
That's a great question. So military families, as many of us know, move on average every 2.5 years. And for military spouses, that has made it incredibly difficult to maintain a career. We hear numbers ranging really from, around 27%, I think is one of the more recent numbers as far as unemployment for military spouses. And then underemployment is also an issue that our community experiences as well. And so you could have a great job in a location, but if it's not set up to be a remote job, then you have to really start from scratch whenever you move. The other thing that's really hard for military families is we don't choose where we live, right? So we could be living in a location that we don't have a network there. We don't have family nearby who can step in and support with childcare. And for those of us with children, even something as simple as going to a doctor's appointment without having childcare available can really set you back. And so there are a lot of nuances that military families experience, and as you mentioned, Sarah, a lot are relying on a single income to sustain the household, and when you layer things like the frequent moves on top of that, like the difficulty finding childcare, then unfortunately we see some of the second and third order effects that MFAN and others have really been working toward.
Yeah. And you're so right. I loved how you said, we don't get to choose. I think that's a really big difference when we talk about military families as opposed to people in the civilian world, is they have the flexibility of saying, well, maybe I'd like to take this job or not. What does that look like for my family? And those in the military, we don't have that option, right? So I loved how you pinpointed and highlighted that, because a lot of times that gets lost kind of in the translation of, well, just plan for it. Well, I don't know where I'm going to live. I might be in Alaska next and I need a parka. I don't know.
A parka.
So, it brings another added layer of, can be stress and stressful, but another added layer of having to be ready and prepared for it. We can talk about too, one of the most unpredictable and unexpected things, right? We've been in a pandemic for the last 2 years. So, what type of things do you think that maybe we could take away from a positive from getting a preparedness plan? Maybe really trying to think about what can we do to set ourselves up for financial success?
Yeah, so a big part of it is planning for the unexpected. I think that the COVID, that has allowed us, when we first started with this a few years ago, it's like, oh, this will be a couple months. And then, oh, no, it's a couple more months. Oh, no, it's a year. And okay, now here we are. But I think that it has allowed us to see there's so much outside the realm of what's predictable. And that's something that military families, I think, are a little bit more, able to navigate than maybe civilian counterparts, because there is so much that's outside of our control, be it deployments, the frequent moves, you name it. And so what we've really seen and hope to continue to see is people not being afraid to ask for help, and people seeking out the support that they might need, be it from a financial counseling perspective or really things as basic as food. We've done a lot of work around food insecurity over the course of the last year, because we found that during the pandemic, 1 in 5 of our survey respondents was experiencing food insecurity. And so there is a real component of actively serving military families who are having a very hard time making ends meet. Things that have also complicated all of this, the housing market. I mean, people are having to buy houses when they weren't necessarily planning to buy a house because there's no rental inventory, or they're dealing with incredible wait lists at an installation because just there isn't the housing capacity to meet the need. Or also things like the basic allowance for housing in a lot of cases has not kept up with the cost of living. And so we're seeing, thanks to the GAO report that was released in 2021, we're seeing some real work that needs to be done as we look to address some of those discrepancies in that support.
That's great. And one of the things that I just love that the Military Family Advisory Network is doing is, just like you said, is you're keeping a pulse on this, right? So you are saying, we're taking out surveys, we're doing this, and we're seeing there's food insecurities. How do we shift that? How do we plan now for this unexpected event? And it's such a great benefit. I really like how you talked about asking for help. I think that's a really important thing. A lot of times in the military community, right, especially service members, they don't want to ask for help. It shows maybe a sign of weakness in some way. And I think it's important to get the word out that it's not a sign of weakness in any way. Asking for help is what organizations like you all are doing. So I just, kudos, that's awesome. One of the things that I kind of want to get into too, our next little discussion area would be some saving strategies and recommendations. So as we understand that there is this unpreparedness, right? We don't know, it's unpredictable, we're not prepared. How do we get prepared? How do we plan? Do you have maybe any recommendations for our audience on maybe baseline goals that families should try to meet to ensure preparedness, certain months worth of living expenses or salary?
Yeah, so I want to talk about a few data points to kind of frame this conversation. So these are data points from before the pandemic. So back in 2019, we found that 27.4% of our survey respondents had $500 or less in emergency savings. And then we found that 23.5% of respondents had no viable plan for getting financial help in the case of an emergency. So there are a lot of numbers I think that are tossed around. We usually go by 3 months of living expenses as far as what you would need, and then really planning for PCSs and knowing that there are going to be things that you're going to have to pay for upfront and get reimbursed for later. And a lot of people, have a very hard time with that. There are a lot of hidden costs as it relates to PCSing. As far as things to do, I think that the idea of saving can feel incredibly daunting, especially if you're having a hard time making ends meet. But knowing that a little bit can go a long way, and starting to acculturate yourself to saving so that you get used to it, and just putting a little bit away, it will take time, but you will grow that. Also, taking advantage of the resources that are out there and designed to serve military families is really, really important. So, if you're taking advantage of a local resource that's out there, that can free up some money that then you could put toward your emergency savings. And so making sure that you have a clear picture of the landscape of support so that then you can access the things that might be available. And Sarah, as you mentioned, there really is this culture of pride in the military, and it's complicated by the fact that things like security clearance and thinking about credit and all those things really can layer and add an additional amount of stress. But making sure that people are aware of the support systems that are out there, like the relief societies, and avoiding things like the predatory lenders who are going to really take advantage of a situation and can put you in a situation that it's very, very hard to dig out of.
Yeah. Gosh, you talked about so many wonderful things there. So I want to pull out a couple of things. One, it's about to be PCS season, right? It's spring, summer, everyone's going to be moving, preparing for that and that added cost. I had no idea. You said 25%, that's a fourth of our service members. When you think about that, there's 1/4 of our service members does not have some sort of emergency fund. And I think to myself, okay, well, if you don't have an emergency fund and an emergency comes up, what happens? Well, you could go to a predatory lender, right? You could get yourself into trying to find a quick fix that's going to actually set you back further. One of the things that I just absolutely love when I started learning about budgeting and thing was the 50-30-20 rule, right? You want to, 50% for your needs, 30% for your wants, and 20% for that savings. And so you touched on kind of just all those things, which is great. One of the things I kind of wanted to get maybe some of your insight into is we are such a technology driven, right, place and world now. Everything's in our fingertips. Everything's on our phone. I know MNAP, you guys have an absolutely phenomenal webpage where you can find resources. It's concise, it's clear. But do you have any other suggestions maybe of technologies as a way to save? Maybe more apps or things like that?
Yeah, so we actually, in partnership with the Association of Military Banks of America and also VA, launched a program recently called VetSense. It's a counterpart
Mhm.
to our program MilSense, but it's really designed to give people information in bite-sized chunks. So finances can be a really like scary topic, and like, oh my gosh, I don't understand this part, so I'm just going to avoid, right? So
Yep.
what we really work hard to do is bring people through a path so that they get the information that they need when they're ready for it in a way that's digestible, and it's not going to be scary because of all the jargon and big words and terminology that's used. We work a lot with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. They are a fantastic organization that does one-on-one support for families. They are also part of this partnership with the Association of Military Banks of America and VA. And so we're starting to see, more and more people turning to technology to get support, but then also not forgetting that there are financial counselors that are available who can meet with you in person. Sometimes that's more comfortable, and sometimes that's what you need. Military One Source is also, a good place to start for different types of financial education and financial support. But I think that the biggest thing is making sure that you're going to a trusted place that's been vetted, a trusted place that understands the nuances of military life, so that you don't get taken advantage of, and that your plans and your goals are structured in the context of being a military family.
Yeah, that's so important. It's really important. Here at AFRIN, we do financial planning, and when I talk about financial planning, sometimes we talk about making sure somebody understands us, meaning the military, understands what we're going through financially and how it looks very different than the civilian world. So sometimes people take advantage of that. They take advantage of knowing someone's only going to be in town for 2 years and then they're going to be out of town, right? So, those are just great recommendations. And I love to know that technology is actually making things easier, right? Sometimes it can feel like it makes it a little bit harder. So something that's going to make it easier is even better. What about, right, we have this 1/4 of our service members don't have an emergency fund. When our budget might be already tight, because that's kind of what it's telling us, right? Our budget's already tight. What are some creative ways or ways that we can make room for extra savings?
Yeah, I think it's starting small, and like I said before, it's understanding what other types of support are out there that can help you. So something as simple as going to the commissary can provide a great savings, for people who have the eligibility and can seek that support.
Mhm.
And so by thinking about how you're spending your time and also how you're spending your resources to make sure that any possibility you have to free up money is used in a smart way. And then, like I said, working with organizations like AFMA to understand how is it best to use the limited resources that you have. I think that there's a perception of, to go to this type of support, you need to be in a high net worth position, but that's not the case. And there is a scalable model and a customizable plan that will work really wherever you are. And so I think it's taking that step and making the commitment to save, and making the commitment to start, which is really critical. Budgeting is super important. It's as basic as being able to forecast out, okay, this month is going to be tighter because we're paying for extracurricular sports. Okay, what do we have to adjust to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a place where we can't put food on the table? And really thinking through those things, understanding that you can't live outside of your means. And but also what I love about the 50-30-20 is it does give you room to treat yourself, and no one wants to be so beholden to a budget that they don't live their life. And I think that as long as you're doing it in a smart way where the budget does incorporate that percentage of fun, doing things with your family, enjoying life, that's really important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because human nature, we create a budget and it's sticking to the budget. That's the discipline to do that. And our human nature kind of sways us away from that if you're going to be really stringent and I can't do this, right? The second you say I can't, it's like, well, you can, you just need to plan for it. So I like how you frame that in kind of a bite-sized chunk of, start now, because it's never too late. Really, it's not too late to start now and to start saving and to start small, because otherwise it seems really daunting and it seems really big, when in fact, it doesn't need to feel that big, and we can start small. What about for our families, right? A lot of times, and we kind of touched on this, that might have gotten into some kind of debt, like paying down existing debt and establishing a savings for an emergency fund. Which, if either, is more immediately important?
That's where it's going to come down to a lot of, specifics, in my opinion. So it depends on, the interest rate. It depends on a lot of different things. And that's where you shouldn't really try to figure it out on your own. Take advantage of the resources that are out there, get that support. Because, there's, some debt that's good debt, right? And so understanding what that looks like, how that works toward your credit report, and what you can do to really get yourself into an overarching, healthier financial state. And again, as I mentioned before, thinking about things like security clearance and some of those nuances that are very real for military families, but also being able to save so that you can put first and last month rent down in a very difficult housing market, and not, finding yourselves in a situation where you don't have a place to live. And so everything requires, I think, some give and take, but making sure that you are leaning on people who are experts, who understand the military lifestyle, is really important.
Yeah, it really is. And that goes to, asking the question, educate yourself. Sometimes we have to take a little bit of, self-discipline on ourselves to say, okay, I need to just start calling and asking questions and educate myself on what resources are out there, and just ask, because you never know until you ask. And like we said, PCS season's coming up. One of the things too that I always kind of thought of is that at some point your military career will end, right? It might end in 20 years or 25 years, or it might end in 10 years. And so, while you can create a safety net and build savings, this would be the time to do that. Thinking, forward into the future. I think a lot of times, especially for military, we get kind of really caught in the here and the now, because there's so much going on, especially with the service member. We still have to plan, right, for that future. And that's something that, you guys do a great job of helping navigate people through.
That's a great point. And thinking about things like, what retirement plan is right for you. We've seen all the changes with blended retirement system and the legacy high three, and really taking the time to have that conversation as a family, and thinking through what makes the most sense based on your long-term goals as a unit. And so that's, I think, a really important piece too, and just making sure that, if you're not going to be in for 20 years, then you're taking advantage of the blended retirement system, because it is going to give you some support. And that's a huge added benefit that, we didn't have a few years ago, when it was either, high three or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. I know when that got passed, I think it was 2018. I was just thinking, we're finally caught up now, kind of with the civilian sector, they've been having 401ks forever. Like, what about us? What about the military? It's either all or nothing. It doesn't quite set you up for success. So, like you said, that blended retirement system, or just thinking about, when the end of this career is going to start, or what's it going to look like for our family unit. Such a great point. So I want to talk to, you've talked kind of briefly about the Military Family Advisory Network, and the kind of resources that you have. What about looking into creating maybe a financial preparedness? What resources could people look to your network to do that and utilize those resources?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we bring together a coalition called the Military Family Financial Readiness Coalition, which has about, I think, 70 participating organizations right now. And what we do is we meet quarterly to discuss the hot button issues that are facing families as it relates to finances, but also to create a network so that we're sharing information about resources that are out there, are available, that people should know about as far as getting support. And so we have a webpage about that with some of the resources that are available. We also work really hard to make sure that we're connecting people to local support that's out there and available to them. Every community has different needs. Every service member and military family has different needs, and every community has a different, flair or flavor, if you will. And so we really want to make sure that we understand those local landscapes and we can make appropriate connections for people to trusted, vetted resources so that they can, build their network, and they can also, get support as it relates to finance or other things. The reality is that financial health is commingled with so many other parts of life. As we look at things like food insecurity, housing experiences, loneliness, mental health, it really does play a role in all these different parts of our life. And if you adjust the financial health of someone, it can change a lot of other parts of their life. And so we really see this thread that goes through every part of a military family's life that has a connection to the finances. And so we really do believe it's foundational to getting families to a point where they can thrive.
Yeah, you just said that so well, that it's the foundation, it's the building block, it's where we all need to start. And I love what MNAT's doing. And I must say, on your site, on your website, I thought it was great. There's a place you can actually put in your zip code, and it'll tell you your resources to where you are. How wonderful is this, right? I could be in Alaska, or I could be in Tennessee, and I could still find my resources. So it's just wonderful. It's wonderful what you guys are doing. It's such a conversation that needs to happen, is to prepare for the unexpected, right? It's what we do. I still can't get that statistic out of my head that a fourth of our military doesn't have more than $500 in it. So I want to thank you so much, Shannon, for being with us here today, for taking your expertise, for telling us what you guys are doing, and for being there as a true support and advocate of the military community. I mean, thank you. And I want to thank everybody else who's out here too, for our audience, for joining us today. Thank you for your service, whether you're a service member or you're a spouse or a family member. Thank you for your service and for joining us today. We are going to have another live session coming up, and I hope everybody can join in. It's going to be June 11th, and we're going to be discussing housing considerations for the military community, something Shannon and I were just kind of talking about, and kind of the impact that the housing situation's having on our military community. So AFMA Mortgages is going to be on, and they're going to be talking about things that you need to be thinking about within the housing market. So hopefully everyone can join them, and that'll be June 11th at 1:15 Eastern Standard Time. So again, thank you so much, Shannon, for being here. It was just great.
Thank you. It was great to chat with you, and grateful for everything that you all do at AFMA, because the culture piece and understanding the culture of the military is so critical in all of this work. And so what you all do really makes a big difference. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you're right. It just is. So hopefully all together, we can just keep supporting the military community and supporting families, military spouses, and kiddos, and all of it. So thank you all today. We're going to sign off from here, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their Tuesday, and look for that June 11th live stream, which we're going to talk about housing, another hot topic. So thank you.
Thank you.